Do you ever get tired of playing the same flat character with different classes and backgrounds, campaign after campaign? Well, in this episode, we're going to talk about how to use writing techniques to make more interesting characters. There is no correct way to roleplay. If you're into playing flat two-dimensional characters and you're more about the min-maxing or just kicking in doors and killing monsters, that's perfectly fine. But if you're sick of playing that same grim ranger sitting in the back of a CD bar, these tricks might help you make something a little more interesting. To start out, completely forget about the idea of picking a class or background at this stage in the game. The problem is most people will build the mechanical aspects of their character first and then move on to coming up with background for that. Which, again, if that's something you enjoy, then, great. But for the sake of this video and for the sake of this method, we're just going to get rid of that idea altogether for now. Instead, what we want to do is focus on some ideas or ideals that you're interested in. This could be just a simple concept, an idea you had or a conversation you overheard that gave you some inspiration. For instance, let's say you had an idea for a character who is in a leadership role and is betrayed by those he thought were loyal to him. It's just a simple idea, but you can expand on that. And from here, we can look at tropes, right? The Grim Ranger in the back of the CD bar, but how we can play with those tropes and make them different than what most people expect. And, that could be something as simple as you have that CD Ranger, but he's not actually a ranger. He just has this tendency to go out to bars and dress like a ranger on the weekends. In reality, he's really some rich merchant who just finds life boring. And as you're thinking of these ideas and tropes, it's also good to think of the opposites of those ideas and tropes. And this just gives you something to compare it to. And it'll give you a dynamic and could potentially open up ideas. Like if you have someone who is a do-gooder, but you have them doing stuff all the time that's very anti that idea, there's a way you can play with that so that there's a conflicting dynamic in the character. After you've come up with your initial idea or trope or how you want to play with the trope, at that point, it's a good idea to come up with a list of interview questions. And you're going to ask your character those questions. And instead of trying to think of how they would respond, just write down the first thing that comes to your head, the first ideas. Because often when you start thinking about those tropes and ideas, it does kind of set a theme in your mind. So it will really help to just write down the first thing that comes to mind and just go with that for every single one of those answers. And when you create the questions, make sure it's a combination of both mundane questions, like what's your favorite color, and specific questions like, what was the most traumatic thing that happened to you when you were growing up? After the interview is conducted, then think about your character's greatest enemy. And I don't mean a specific person. I just mean what personality traits would clash the most with them. And you can then expand on how that character would deal with this enemy. Would they kill them? Would they avoid them? That sort of thing. Now let's think about the details of the character, because that's when we're going to start to really be able to flesh the character out. And for this, you don't want to focus on universal experiences. Those things will come out and play. Those parts of your character that make them relatable. That's just going to come from you naturally. What you want to focus on are the particulars. What makes your character peculiar? Because that's what is going to make them stand out. For instance, blue eyes are blue eyes, but that specific limp that that character has is very distinctive. And when you have those distinctive kind of trademarks in your characters, it really brings them to life. You know, when you think of when you think of description for a character, let's say the character is walking through the room, think of the way that writers use description in their books. You're not generally going to read something like the redhead walked across the room, and if you do, you might want to question why you're reading that piece of literature. What you were more likely to see is a little more detail, right? You would at least see the redhead sauntered across the room, and it gives you a visual idea of how the redhead is moving through the room. But you want to even bring it further, because that still doesn't tell you anything. You know, you would want to describe the way the light kind of ripples through the hair as the redhead saunters through the room. That gives you more. And in addition to these descriptors, what quirks do your characters have? You know, do they look a particular way when they swallow tea wrong while they're filming themselves? Are they sweating, tearing up, got a little frog in their throat? Really, that's not, that doesn't really work in this scenario, but you get an idea. Really, what you want to look at for quirks is, does your character like scratch their ear when they're talking, or do they do something specific when they're nervous? That sort of thing. And then we want to think about how the character interacts with others. What is their disposition towards new people that they meet or old friends that they run into? How does the character treat their friends? How do they respond to certain events like crisis or defeat, that sort of thing? Those types of interactions and details are useful because it gives you a reference to how you should respond in a particular situation. It's also a good tool for your other players. You know, if your NPC or your PC is acting a certain way, well, that'll cue them up to do some role playing as a response to that. Then the next place we're going to go with this is the skeletons in the closet. Right? All of our characters should have things that they don't want anyone else to know. Because, like us, any real character, any well-written character, is going to have those skeletons. Think of the secrets that the character would die to keep. Think of even the small secrets that they really don't want to tell anyone. They're a little bashful when they come out, but it's not a be-all, end-all for the character. These are things that even if they never come out in gameplay, you have those so that they will inform your decisions on how the character would react to a situation or to a conversation or anything like that. Well, once we have our characters, you know, id and persona and personality really kind of growing, we can start to place them in the world of the game. How do they fit into the setting? If they're an NPC, how do they react to others? How do others react to them? Those sorts of things. If it's a PC, think about what kind of role your character is going to have in the party. Does your character fit in to the party? Are they compatible? Will they get along with everybody? Or are they just going to be a huge jerk? And you can pull that off. You can have a successful character that just doesn't fit in with the party, but you have to do it right, and you have to do it in a way that's fun for everybody, not just you. You can't play that character who might be a good, interesting character, but is just spiteful and hateful and is going to just interrupt everything the players want to do. Once you start becoming an obstructionist, the players are going to stop looking at your character and looking at you. So you want to make sure, if you have that type of abrasive character, you really need to make sure that your other players buy in and that they're going to be able to have fun too. You don't want to ruin the night for everybody. The last part of how they fit in is now the part that so many have so much fun with, and that's the mechanics, the class, the background, those types of things. How can we make this character work in the particular game that you are playing? Think of it like this. You created this character who grew up out in the wilderness, and one time they happened to see a performance put on by some traveling performers. And from that day, this young person wanted to become a performer. They're an aspiring poet or acrobat or actor or musician, whatever it is. Well, now they're growing up, they're learning the ways of living in the wild and surviving. So you have this ranger who's really an aspiring actor, and let's say the charisma level is not really anything all that great, which can be fun to play with because you're now, you have a character who wants these things, but they don't have the ability to get there yet. In that particular situation, I'd actually created a ranger who had an entertainer background, because I think that would be fun. You could probably do barbarian as well. I think druid might start getting a little weird, but you could make that work. It all depends on how you do it. I think the important thing with this part of it is going to be, well, let's take that ranger with the entertainer background, and let's say they start off with an 8 for charisma. Well, grow that 8 into something that's more acceptable for an entertainer. And that helps you build a character arc, which is one of the most important parts of creating an interesting character. How is that character going to grow from day 1 to day 365? Mechanics are often put first, and I think we limit ourselves by doing that. If you put your character first and the type of character you want to play, once you have everything kind of drawn up, you can make the mechanics fit what you're trying to do. Again, by no means is this any sort of prescriptive way of telling you how to role play or create a character or anything like that. This is just some tools you can use to try and make characters that are more interesting. And they might not even work. Maybe you have a better way of doing it. This is just my take on it. I think some of the key takeaways would be make sure it works, both in the game and with your other players. Don't do something that's just going to be out in left field. You don't want to go to your GM and say, hey, this is the character I want to play, and it's a clown, and your GM wants to run a really dark, serious campaign. You got to work with other people, and you want to make sure that your party has some buy-in as well. Particularly, again, if you decide to make an abrasive character, you want to make sure that they know where you're coming from with it. The funny and very useful thing about this is, as you're doing all these things, you're going to be doing a lot of writing. So you have that as reference for yourself, but when your GM asks for a backstory or something about your character, you can hand this over and say, here, I might not have a full novel about my backstory, but here's my character. And that's going to be super helpful for any game master, because it's going to allow them to really incorporate your character into their world. Let me know your thoughts. Does this sound like something you could use in your campaign or when you're making your next character? Do you have any other suggestions, maybe some better tools or additional tools that anyone could use? Do you just want to troll me? However you want to respond to this, I'm fine. Just be nice to each other. And with that, I want to thank you for spending this time with me. And the next videos, I'm probably going to start doing some hobby videos here soon. So stand by for those, and we will definitely have at least one video a week, hopefully more. We'll see how things go, and we'll see how you guys respond to them. That's why you shouldn't drink tea way too fast.